cold day to meet. It's our first meeting since we've had our public outreach, and so it's a good time to reconvene, to refocus as we move forward into the next phase of the state water plan development. And as we kind of review what kind of feedback we got from our survey and from our outreach. So with that, Wes, I think we can head into it with the next slide. So on today's agenda, we want to go through, talk briefly about some of the public and political awareness of the state water plan, discuss finalizing submittals for identifying the issues in the state water plan, talk about how we want to work on developing our basically our sections of the report, the draft recommendations, and discuss kind of the report structure and how we want to put that forward, both in written form and in a website manner as well. Then kind of go through and see what folks thought of the public comments we received and whether that redirects us or changes anything in our minds. And then finally review the schedule and talk about next steps in our next meeting. Unless anybody else has something they would like to add to the agenda. All right, well, hearing none, let's proceed. This first point here on the agenda, the public and political awareness, and Wes has some slides here that have the Joliet headlines that have popped up, and I include that because of Joliet and the amount of press that it's gotten recently about their petition for Lake Michigan water, and as a result of work that's been done by many, even on this on the task force, to point out challenges that community will have with the deep aquifer and their well system. I guess I wanted to just make the group aware that definitely brought things into the spotlight in the governor's office, and so they basically turned and asked me, well, what is the state's water policy? Well, that's a big, very loaded question. What is the state's water policy? I mean, what is our water policy on levees? What is our water policy on groundwater? What is our water policy on water quality? As we well know, with all the various topics that we've delved into, there's many different focus areas that where we can and should develop policy, and where we already have. And so really the state water plan becomes that mechanism and that vehicle and that focal point for what is the state's water policy. And that's the message I've basically delivered back to the governor's office, but I wanted everybody on the task force to be aware that they very much, the governor's office and deputy governors are very tuned in to water right now, from a water supply, water quality, long-range water planning. That seems to be at the top of their inbox. So I just wanted to make everybody aware of that, and it again puts the focal point on why the state water plan and the updates that we're going forward with here becomes so important and critical. And so it provides that vehicle and a place where we can turn to say, well, this is what we as the collective agencies associated with water are spotlighting on our policy or recommending for changes to our policy and program. So just as we get into the meeting, wanted to highlight that issue. And obviously the media is going to stay plugged into the Joliet issue and what's happening there. Obviously the aquatic invasive species and that realm with Brandon Road and Joliet being in the spotlight in the media not lately too. That's been brought to the forefront. So there's a lot of water issues at hand right now. Also dealing with the governor's office right now on trying to develop a long-term regional plan for the upper Mississippi when it comes to sedimentation and drought and flooding and levees and those kinds of issues. So just a heads up and a reinforcement of the importance of the update to the plan. So thank you, Wes. We can move on. I don't know, Wes, did you want to talk about what we need here for finalizing these issues?
Yeah, Lauren, I can speak to this a little bit. As you all know, we had our public outreach for the identifying issues within each of the 13 critical topics back in mid-March, I'm sorry, mid-December. And that was fairly successful. We had a public comment period that we'll kind of dive into with a little more detail that ended in the middle of January. So we wanted to take this opportunity. We're going to kind of go over those comments a little bit. But just as a reminder, we kind of have on our schedule to wrap up or create what we'll call a final draft of these identifying issues. So, you know, each of the lead individuals will be asked to submit those around that March 8th deadline. And this year, you know, we kind of got delayed by the pandemic and stuff like that. So we're going to have a fairly fast-paced schedule for 2021. So it's kind of getting kicked off by this March 8th deadline. And then we'll quickly move into the recommendations public outreach section. And I know a lot of committees have already kind of started that effort, but you know, it's important that we don't start getting behind with this initial submittal of the critical issues. So just keep that in mind or note that on your calendar that March 8th is when we're going to be looking to receive those.
So Wes, just to help me understand that as well. So we had our 13 primary issues. I don't think we heard anything in our initial outreach that would cause us to delete any of those 13 or add a 14th issue. So I guess confirmation of that. But then what you're looking for on the 8th is really kind of the sub issues under each of those critical issues. Am I understanding that correct?
Yeah, so just to kind of confirm, we did get some feedback saying that, well, yeah, we think this is a good list. These 13, what we'll call topics, were supported based on the feedback I saw in our comments. I'm not sure if anybody else saw anything differently, but I think the comments saying that it needs to include this item or that item all fell within those 13 topics. They were just kind of more specific within those 13 topics. So maybe more applied to these were the you know, issues that should be addressed within one of those 13 topics. So I think it's good to review those. Each of the 13 topic leads should review that and see if they're kind of incorporating those issues that may have been raised in the public feedback. So yeah, I don't see us needing to add or change either of those or any of those 13 topics that we initially identified. Does that clarify your question, Lauren?
Yes, thank you. I think so. The next question that comes into my mind is, is there a limit to those, right? I mean, in one topic area, we might identify, you know, 3 subtopics, and in another topic, you know, we might find that there are 27 subtopics. Is there any thoughts on whether we would try to limit that to kind of a top 5 or top 10 within each topic area?
Yeah, I'll kind of open that up to the group for their thoughts if we want to put a numeric value on that, with knowing that these are our objectives for the next 5 to 10 years that we'll want as a task force to kind of promote and move forward. So it's not meant to be all inclusive, but more of a, short to medium term goal of addressing these. So, I guess I'll put it out to the task force members as, do you guys think we should limit the amount of issues we want to raise within a given topic? And if so, what would that number be? So feel free to unmute yourself and share your thoughts.
Hi, Wes and Lauren. This is Yufeng. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I think those topics are important topics, and then if we eliminate some of those, could that be creating the issue to the stakeholders who raise that question? And then instead, pick some of them. Maybe we can also add another element as time, and we can make it more like a different time scale, and some of the topic in the more urgent time scale, and then some topic is more like a long-term time scale. And so do you think that could be an option of doing that? Thank you.
That's a good point, Yufeng, right? That you might identify a topic, and it might be an objective or a task that's completed in the first 6 months, right? And so kind of overdone, success, move on, and perhaps others could come in. And so the comment I would make is, what we've shared with everybody that we've engaged with has been that this is kind of a fluid document, not a paper product that is supposed to last us, for another 40 years like the last one, but a 5-year focus and can be added to and tweaked and revised going forward. So that's a key point. And I would also just make the point to everybody that the state water plan does not have to necessarily answer every question we raise. It'd be nice that we have some recommendations for change based on some of these issues in each topic. But if nothing else, the state water plan can be used to just put the spotlight on a particular issue that's going to require more discussion or attention or research over the next 5 years to advance resolution of that issue.
Lauren, this is Laura Kiefer. I like Yufeng's suggestion, and just that, we may need to identify a long-term issue, identifying an issue, but then it would have to result in several, short-term recommendations to kind of give it a context, and then could that then be used for then the sowing the seeds for the next plan, so that things don't get lost as to why an issue was identified because it was part of a larger problem. Just allowing the long term, giving context to the shorter term activities.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I like that idea as well. That's very similar to what we're doing. I know on the Upper Mississippi plan, that's the focus of that current report, is very much identifying near-term and long-term kind of issues and tasks. So I would be open to having that kind of an approach in each of the topic areas to identify near-term recommendations or actions, and those longer-term ones. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be rooted in
Yeah, well,
identifying the problems, so that it would feed then into the recommendations.
Somebody else have a comment?
This is Brian Cox with IDPH. I think the short answer to it would be, I think that, in my personal opinion, I don't think that we should limit that. I think that taking an approach of identifying basically short-term and long-term issues, I would definitely be in agreement with that. because I think if we recognize that there are issues at hand that need to be addressed, I think it would be contrary to what the purpose of this group is to essentially just remove them from the list. I think we recognize that there's going to be more immediate topics that need to be addressed. And so I think identifying them as short-term and establishing milestones for when we want to address them, I think is a better approach.
Lauren,
Thank
just
you.
my thought kind of on how we address the long term is that a lot of long term goals have short term steps built within them. It's not like we are going to go ahead and accomplish this long term goal on year 9 and not take any steps leading up to that. Now, with that said, I think we still want to make sure we prioritize our efforts and say that, you know, do we include a short statement saying that we recognize these other issues, but they weren't deemed top priorities and therefore they'll be taken up in a future report. You know, we can list 38 priorities, but we know we probably aren't going to address all 38 in the next 5 years. But, you know, 5 of those 38 may be long-term goals that have short-term steps to accomplish them.
Okay, other thoughts? Yeah, so we could identify those as, yeah, you know, near term, intermediate term, long term kind of actions. I think as we'll get into when we talk about the, you know, the report itself or the what we're trying to put forward, that may become part of, if you know, if you find within your topic area that you do have, you know, 27 of them, then maybe we talk about how that's prioritized or presented. But generally, I think just the development of it will shed some of that out.
Hi, Lauren. This is Yufeng again. And listen to the colleague's suggestion, and an idea just pumped up to me is instead, in addition to adding the time components and like a long-term, short-term, do you think it would be helpful if we also identify the impact of those problems? So, for example, if this is like a local issue or statewide issue or even beyond state, is like other states have the same issue with us. And the reason of doing that is if it is the issue important to us, but also impact other states, that might be something we can discuss with governor's office and then also talk to other states to have more like a regional or even federal support on that as a definitely more long-term type of the planning on that. So instead, in addition to adding the time components, and then we can also add another more like a geographic components on the impact of that. So just another thought to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Yufeng. Any other thoughts on that? So we're looking for those, I guess, sub issues under each topic then by March 8th. And those would be submitted to Wes Couture. Is that how we want to do that, Wes?
Yeah, that's fine. I have kind of a tracking that we have, seeing who's submitted and putting it all in one place. So yeah, if everybody just submits it to me by email, that would be great.
All right, are we ready to move on to the report structure? We've kind of touched on that already here, but I think within, and again, we're looking, to our audience is, while we have many interested, parties in this state water plan, I think one of the intended audiences certainly was the administration and the General Assembly, especially as it relates to policy or programmatic changes or potential legislation that would be required in that realm. And so that's where the idea of essentially having a document or a plan in whichever form it's viewed is something that wasn't so voluminous that it discouraged people from looking into it. So that's where I think we were talking about on each topic area having a few pages wherein we the issue is really identified and explained as to what we mean by that topic or what we mean by what is that issue, and then a section that would have could have background if that adds value to understanding that issue, but then really a recommendation section at that point. And again, that recommendation section could be recommend further further investigations, further study, further actions to resolve, or it could be we recommend this change right now, and that being kind of the meat of that section as well. In my mind, I see it having a lot of some graphics or photos that help illustrate those issues or those recommended actions. Thoughts on that from the group? And I guess I would say I think it's similar to what's been done in the past. If there is a particular issue or even a recommendation or action that has a lot of information that needs to be there, that can be referenced as a separate appendix or a separate document even, that can be used to really share a lot more information in detail, without necessarily trying to provide pages and pages of information within the water plan document or focus itself.
Lauren, one thing that we have spoken about is, wanting to create a more dynamic report. And I think what we're talking about here at the moment is more the static write-up that can be hand delivered to our representatives and everything if we're going to promote something. But the question is, I guess I have is, do we also need to kind of lay out what this dynamic website will look like? Is that a topic for another day? But just something that we want to keep in mind, that we also want this to be more accessible to the public and be able to follow as we make progress in this plan. And like I said, maybe this is a topic for another day, but I just want to bring that to light, that's kind of a side effort to this main written report.
Yeah, thank you, Wes. I think you hit that nail on the head there, that we do want it to be more of that interactive. And I guess I see the state water plan website, or I guess that's where we would develop that as being kind of that portal into these issues. So besides, creating, in essence, you're right, a document that could be shared or that somebody could download, I also see it as being web pages that if somebody has a question about recreation or about, Lake Michigan, that they can go there and these issues are identified and the recommendations are there, or and exhibits and so forth that could be used as a communication tool and a way to share with those folks that want to, engage or have a concern about what the state's doing in that particular realm. I do think that might warrant its own separate meeting and discussion of how we form that up once we see what we're getting for issues and recommendations.
Hi, Lauren. I got another idea to share, but I'm not so sure if it's good or not. So I need to check with group here. On the recommendation part, do you think it would be good to add a small, like a short item on the kind of highlight the potential partner? So the reason I raised this question is the really good work you have done recently on the AIS issue to bring Michigan to work with us on that one. That was a huge achievement on that. And a lot of other issues, in addition to our state's effort and potential partners we could identify, could be neighboring state or USGS or other federal agencies or even foundations. If we identify that gives a more specific, give more idea to the governor's office, and then they might be able to seek out the federal aid or foundation support and other more than just state budget on that one. So that's why I want to check with you, see if that will help. Thank you. And just using your example with working with Michigan on that AI Brandon Road issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Yufeng. Well, that's a good point. Is that something we want to, we definitely could include that kind of a partners. And so, yeah, if you're talking about flood control, you might identify, the Corps of Engineers or others as potential partners. Although that list can be, could grow quite large. I mean, that, you look at those issues, and I'll just pick on the Farm Bureau, right? With the Farm Bureau may be very interested in partnering and engaging on any or all 13 of those issues, and so do you identify them? And if you identify the Farm Bureau, then are you identifying the Nature Conservancy or others? So I like the idea, just to kind of point out that there are those interested folks out there beyond the state agencies that would want to engage and influence and interact in each of those issue areas. Other thoughts on that item?
Lauren, in the 1984 plan, some of the critical issues, do go that far in actually mentioning who could be pursuing or might take responsibility for a recommendation, or who would be working together. So, and I think that probably, obviously with people's agreement, but it's in the last plan, and I agree with Yufeng. I think giving some of that potential direction would be helpful. It just doesn't lay out there like this needs to be done, and then it's not given some legs.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I guess I would agree with that. That a plan that doesn't identify who's going to carry out the plan isn't that much of a plan. So having identified, especially if you have a recommendation, that the DNR will introduce legislation to do X, Y, and Z, or the State Water Survey in partnership with the Nature Conservancy or something will do ABC. I think that adds a lot of value when we can identify those parties that are willing to take ownership of that action in order to help move it forward.
Hey, Lauren, I would agree that identifying the lead for a recommendation would be good, just as we have leads for these 13 topics. I would be a little cautious to start creating a participants list within a recommendation, in that, if we leave out an entity, we're likely going to get some backlash over that. And we may not know fully, in the next 12 months, who all needs to be involved in every one of these recommendations, but we will likely know who's going to take the lead on it.
Good point. Other thoughts?
This is Brian Cox with IDPH again. One of the things that I'm not necessarily seeing on there is goals and milestones for completion. I think that's something else that a plan would typically have, would be the goal of whatever that recommendation is, and then also a milestone for the completion of that. I think we all recognize that that's not something that can be typically a hard and fast thing to determine success. But if you don't have a goalpost, then you don't necessarily know where you're going. So that would be one of the comments I would make to that as well.
Okay, thank you. Would it be helpful to, ask folks or ask the leads as we're developing these particular topic areas, if to maybe submit some suggestions for kind of the layout or structure, and then we could share those and consider what kind of format or order we like best to present the information. And that would really apply probably to whether it's a document type of approach or a website approach as well.
This is Sally. I just have a quick question. Are we using the chat room, the chat box, as part of this meeting? Because I've been posting comments there, and maybe I should have verbalized them.
Feel free to verbalize.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So Lauren, are you talking about kind of a structure for just the recommendations section, or I guess it was unclear.
I think I'm looking at kind of a structure for the topic that would be kind of how we present the issue or the recommendations, just to have some consistency, right? We've already talked about what kind of font we want to use and that sort of thing. Just we should probably have some consistency on how the information and recommendations are presented. And so just looking if as you're developing and what you have, what each issue lead kind of had in mind, we might want to create some format to that we would then share a couple or two or three ideas of that and come to some agreement as a group that, yeah, I think this is kind of the order and format in which we want to present that.
No, I think that's a good idea, because then, if you have some continuity between the issues, it makes it easier for the reader to know what to expect from issue to issue.
Exactly. I mean, I don't mind taking a crack, but I think, the more the merrier. Get
few people willing to put forward some ideas in the next couple weeks or so.
Yeah, I think that's a good way forward. That'll help facilitate that discussion and come to some agreement on that. I'll use this opportunity to remind everybody again about, we've been requested to make certain that we have, woven in social and environmental considerations so that, whether that plays out in the way that recommendations are developed or presented, or whether that becomes kind of a separate subheading under each topic of how that happens. I guess that's open for discussion as well among the group. And it kind of depends on, as we develop these recommendations, how that's coming out. And so I can see us as a group, kind of wrestling with that once we have really started to put meat to the bones on these recommendations, and wanting some consistency on how that's addressed in the plan. I promise you that there are those factions out there that will look at this plan only from that perspective, right? How has this plan, addressed inequities? How has this plan addressed the social and environmental issues at hand? So if we don't weave that in carefully in a well-considered manner, we will be, we'll get that feedback from others on our next outreach, right? Where is it? Why, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? Or how have you done X, Y, and Z to incorporate that? I can just share, in other instances, where we've done some reports where, or outreach, and I've gotten feedback like, well, you're talking about, water structures here. Why aren't you talking about people? People are more important than culverts, that kind of a concept. So I just share that with the group to keep that in the forefront of your mind as you're developing the recommendations and developing the topic issues.
Lauren, this is Tara, and during the public outreach, I did get a lot of feedback about why the social, environmental, and equity was not its own topic. And it did remind me slightly of the climate change topic, where there is a topic just discussing the overview and the background of that issue. And then all of the separate issues are supposed to address climate issue, how it affects their particular issue. So I was just throwing it out there, not that we want another topic, but I think it will be, I guess it wouldn't hurt to really delve into the introduction and overview of the issue so people felt like it was adequately addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Other thoughts from the group on that?
This is Wes. I guess my thought, or at least what I was envisioning for incorporating this, is maybe having a line or a separate couple of sentences saying, this is how we're addressing environmental justice within a recommendation. Maybe it's a separate recommendation, maybe it's a part of a recommendation, but essentially spelling it out. Maybe you give it bold font or something so it doesn't get passed over. Maybe it's a separate line by itself. But, I think if we have it as a separate section, it's going to be too piecemeal. And the example I'll give with water sustainability is that maybe we'll give priority to provide financial assistance to communities that are, a low resource or at need community will be put into our consideration. Now, I think that easily fits into the water sustainability section, but if we have a standalone section, it may seem like it's a bunch of mismatched pieces thrown in one section. I don't know, just my thought.
Well, and I think that's where when we broached this topic before, I think that the idea of having it woven into the topics as much as practical made more sense than just trying to have it as a standalone issue area. That's a slippery slope there, right? I mean, if we did have a standalone issue, how do we know that we haven't? Somebody's going to say, well, why didn't you consider this or that? So trying to consider those factors through the lens of whatever, issue we're into, erosion, sedimentation, recreation, navigation, integrated water management, made more sense, at least in my mind, to try and have it addressed or approach that issue by issue instead of as a, yes, we have inequities and social and environmental justice challenges in the realm of water resources.
Lauren, I agree with that, but also then, when we get closer and closer to a final document that, I would imagine that we would have an introduction or a preface, in there that would start, as we're reading the documents, summarizing and highlighting some of the overarching issues that have been included in each of the critical issues that it would start to be apparent, how we could really summarize and highlight, things that commonly pop up and take homes eventually as well. And so even though everything would be, climate and environmental justice would be incorporated in each of the issues, it would definitely be highlighted in the front material.
Good point.
Lauren?
I guess I see that. That was what I kind of had in mind as well, as an introduction that said, hey, as you're going through this, or you will see, right, climate change and see these environmental or social justice issues.
Lauren, this is Sally. My question is related, if the people who are leading and writing up the issue paper, what kind of resources do we have for understanding what those environmental justice issues are in that topic? I think I know a little bit in flooding, but I just wonder how strong our group, as a group, our understanding is of really what the environmental justice and social issues are.
I was going to bring that up too, Sally. Thank you.
That's a valid question.
Well, if I may contribute a little bit, and this is Yufeng, Lauren, if you don't mind.
Please, Yufeng.
Yeah, and I mean, the environmental justice, this issue, we all know it's not new, but it recently has been brought up a lot at different scale. I mean, we're talking about from local, state, region, the federal scale of this. So just I think Sally raised a very good example. What are going to publish something to address this, and that drives a lot of academic practice right now. Try to figure out what is the best way to address these in kind of summary type of thing. So I think we are in the right process right now, but the good thing is we don't have definite answer at this moment. a lot of discussion is really onto the environmental impact assessment, and then more specific, in more technical part, is related to law. A lot of like air quality law, water quality law, and waste management law, those kind of law there. So at this time, I think if we can have IEPA waiting a little bit more, and Laura, maybe John can help us a little bit, and that could be helpful. And then also at University of Illinois, there's a group of people starting a center called CURES. It's more try to understand part of the environmental justice by working with not just U of I, but not just UIUC, but also Springfield, Chicago campus on how to address these environmental justice. So I have some involvement into that. And what I can say is the picture is still fuzzy in our state here, but the work is in progress at this moment. And I think this is really the golden time for us to dig deep and think how we are going to represent these as an individual topic or as a separate topic scattered around in the other identified issues we have. I think the high level decision we probably should have right now is the format, how are we going to address this, is individual topic or that's embedded into the individual issues we are going to talk here. So in addition to answer Sally's question here, I kind of talk a bit more than that, what I have known in the state and the academic side of it. Thank you.
So Yufeng, were you offering potential resources? I mean, would it be beneficial to the group if we had scheduled a short presentation on some of that from, like you say, individuals that have been studying or working on those kinds of aspects to help us understand how we might look at that. I know from my day job, we've been doing a lot of work in the diversity, equity, and inclusion side of the world to deal with that. And I can certainly bring in Cinnamon, who heads up the Illinois State Museums and is well versed in some of that to give just a brief overview if that would help folks. But that's from that equity and inclusion side of the world. The environmental justice, perhaps there's others, like you say, at one of the universities or something that might help us see that better. I think Sally and Laura make a good point. How do we better know or understand what we're trying to look at there to know how to recommend to deal with it? Thoughts on that, or Yufeng, were you offering resources there? Or?
Yeah, sure, definitely. I'm happy to coordinate this effort from the university side and then, or even some regional partner on this. And I think my point is this question, this issue is probably not as have most like a very solid picture on what the science technical question we have been dealing with before. And so it's still in development, it's still kind of fuzzy, depends on what angle you try to take a look at this. So if we want to take this topic as one issues in the report, then probably in our current status, I would recommend we are more into the development, but we are eager to make this work or to provide better pictures on what as a state, what we are going to do on that. But I think if we want to offer a very specific solution, like technical issues, I think we still got a long way to go, and we need more brainstorm, and then from very multi-different expertise into this. And so that's early. That's why earlier I mentioned about it could be really environmental impact assessment, and it could be really in the law issues and regulation issues into this. It could be just like what Lauren just said, your experience, you're dealing with this day to day. And I think it's really broad. That's what I'm trying to say here. But yes, I'm happy to coordinate some resources into this. Thank you.
Yeah, Lauren, I think too, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, for me, what I was reiterating with Sally is that I was feeling, you know, that needed at least as far as the understanding the problems and the impacts they have in environmental social justice issues, you know, having some material to draw from to understand some of those connections to highlight where the impacts are, but then listing recommendations. We may be ill qualified to do that, but bringing some other people in that could at least broaden those recommendations that need to be carried on by other people in other agencies and laws and policies, things like that, maybe beyond this, or it's a next step after the plan. But I definitely wanted to have be better schooled on, you know, what I may think I know what water issues impact environmental justice issues, but that's that's not my day job. So I guess I was looking more as, you know, how does environmental justice fit in with any of these critical issues so we can identify the impacts. The recommendations are going to be the tricky one, and how far can we really get into that?
Good, good points. You know, an overarching, I guess, an overarching thought that I've had on all this is, you know, and I think work has already been done in this realm. I know, like, you know, CMAPers in this, you know, in the Northeastern Illinois have delved into this, right? How do you establish criteria wherein, okay, look, the state just needs to come in and do this for these people because they don't have the resources to do it themselves. You know, where do you supply and provide a community new water pipes and say, we'll come in and provide that? You know, do you do that for a Ford Heights, but why wouldn't you do that for a Naperville, right? You know, and so but I think there's been work done, and really I think a lot of it probably is in a GIS format where you can, you know, take income levels, or you can take unemployment levels, or you can take minority status, you know, and you overlay all those together, and suddenly, ta-da, this area turns purple, right? And then now you've identified a community or a zone where, you know, it makes a lot of sense to offer, you know, more help or more state resources than it would be in another area. And that, and,
Hey,
and
Lauren, one
that plays
suggestion.
out differently in each issue, though, too.
Lauren, one suggestion as we move into the public outreach for the recommendations and for the final report, could we reach out to some, you know, experts on this topic for them to review and provide comments specifically for this reason, and seeing how maybe if we have base recommendations, those could be modified or adjusted to ensure that we're meeting this goal?
I think the short answer is yes. You know, there are those groups out there. You know, Blacks in Green. You know, just comes to mind right off the top of my head as a resource that would be willing to review, and with that lens to what are you doing in that realm. And I'm sure there's others. You know, American Rivers comes to mind. They particularly have a specific focus to those kinds of views, and so I think we could. Would it be a benefit to us as we go into this next phase of development to have schedule a half-hour, you know, session where we bring in a couple of individuals to help us better understand, you know, how we can look at that lens, or or look at that topic through that lens. I guess that's a question I have for the group, if that would be a benefit for us to try and arrange some kind of a brief on that.
Yeah, definitely. This is Yifeng. I fully support on this idea, Lauren.
Agree.
Yes.
Yes,
Hey, I'll work with Yufeng and we'll see what we can put together for kind of a briefing for the group, a little educational section, no longer than an hour. You know, I'm thinking half hour, 45 minutes. We could have 1 or 2 or 3 speakers come in and help us see that lens better as we're into this next phase of development here.
Lauren, are we looking at March as kind of a time frame?
That sounds like a good plan to me.
Lauren, would it be okay to invite our committee members so that they can also learn about that lens?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think anybody that would be involved in helping to develop those recommendations and develop the presentation of those issues, I think they would all be welcome to engage, and we can learn together on that. All right. Well, as I said, I'll work with Yufeng, and we'll see what we can put together. If you know of resources or thoughts, you're welcome to email those to Yufeng or I, and we will take those into consideration as well. And I'll throw some potential dates out there that we might try to do that here in March. All right. Any other thoughts on that or the structure, report structure? Are we ready to move on?
And I think one suggestion that was mentioned was preparing like some draft or a draft example section for
Yes.
a given topic. It sounded like, Laura, you were willing to prepare one of those as a potential consideration. Is
Yep,
that correct?
I'm willing to do a first round rough brain dump to be chewed and helped by others.
Is there anybody else that'd be willing to maybe put together a conceptual topic section for consideration? And I'll plan on putting one together. Is there anybody else that would like to?
If others wanted to, like, email maybe you and Wes, you and I, with some rogue ideas, if they don't feel they can put something together complete.
Hello, this is Mike.
Email us.
Hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm doing lots of meetings.
And
Technically
Michael,
on one
just
now.
so you know, I think your microphone is unmuted. Okay, I think we got that worked out. Okay, well, Laura and I will work on maybe creating a draft or two, and we will maybe shoot for, Laura, do you think it's reasonable to get that within a couple of weeks, by the end of the month? What do we think that we'd like to try and share those with the group?
Yeah, let's shoot for the end of the month.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, well, if others have an idea, feel free to share those with Laura and I.
All right, I think we've covered everything on this slide. Are we ready to move on then?
Yeah, I think the next thing we had up was the review of public comments. Just a little general information about what we had. We only received about 14 specific emails. We provide email address that individuals could send to. We sent out those to the topic leads that pertain to whatever was contained in the comment or in that email. So some of you may have received a forwarded email from me or from that owr.planning email address. So those have been distributed. So assume that if you haven't received anything, there wasn't anything specific sent on your topic. As you all know, MPC helped prepare a survey regarding the state water plan. You know, as you can see, we had about 700 responses of that. It was prepared in both English and Spanish. And despite efforts to reach out to Spanish-speaking communities, which MPC did say they had specific efforts on that with as well as other partners, we didn't receive any responses there. So I guess it'd be a question if it's worth to undergo that effort or if there's other ways that we can improve communications to that demographic. That's something to consider. I forwarded out the email, and you know what? I'll just pull it up here real quick to see. You should have received this document. It should be up on your screen now. Yeah, you should see the Excel spreadsheet. It essentially contained the responses of each of the questions. So you can see, you know, the vast majority of the responses were from residents and not from specific entities. Over 700 responses, 600 of those were from residents. You know, how did you hear about this? I think this was trying to find out who this was a question MPC was really interested in sending out just to see what kind of response they had. And honestly, the vast majority in just scrolling through these look like Prairie Rivers Network did a great job at getting the word out. So we appreciate their efforts in helping us spread the word as well with all the other partners that are listed here. So if you're curious about, you know, who really got the word out, that's kind of question 2. Question 3 was just how would you rate the topics? And I think I actually even have this on a following slide, so we'll get into more on that. This is where if you really want to see what the comments were specifically, please share any issues you think you updated. This is really hard to summarize. I had a couple listed in that, but you can see equity was a large one. But, you know, really, if you have the opportunity to skim through this as a topic lead to try and find ones that may be applicable to your topic, I highly recommend checking that out and maybe spending, you know, maybe a half an hour to see if you can go through those 400 responses. Actually, I don't think we even have that many on here. Let's see. We have, 270 responses here just to skim through and see, but these have all been provided. You know, number 5, we have area of expertise. So if you see anything here that really jumps out at you, we can definitely work with MPC to find out who that information came from and get their contact information, which is answered on number 8. Maybe number 5 and 8 should have been coupled together as we see contact information here for individuals willing to help. 6 is going to be addressed a little bit more on another slide, and then 7 we also have included. So again, this was sent out. We encourage you to take a look at it and see how these fit into your topic. We want to make sure that we do consider these comments. I know it can be overwhelming with having, in this case, 500 answers to what the future of water resources management looks like. But, we did want to provide some feedback and make sure we incorporate those public comments. So with that, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation. Oh. If you'll bear with me here for a minute. There we go. So again, we had a lot of comments to water equity, access to water. Sometimes there was comments to recreation. Sometimes there's comments to supply. There's also some infrastructure and cost of water, and how do we ensure that we have a sustainable infrastructure in place. That all kind of fell under the access to water. Water quality was obviously a big topic. It always is. Some discussions on groundwater protection was also mentioned in the Elmo 2 process. So again, with having hundreds of comments, it's hard to summarize those within even a 30-minute conversation. So I guess I'll kind of open it up to our task force members or anybody else if there was anything that really jumped out to you. I didn't see anything as much aside from water equity that really hit on the general report that was, less topic specific. I guess, Lauren, do you have any comments or thoughts on the public outreach feedback we received?
Well, yeah, there's, at least 500 different opinions on what the future of water resources in Illinois is, but that's not unexpected to see that. As you mentioned, equity definitely jumped to the top in common topics there. Water quality is a key concern, as is really engagement of partners kind of jumped out at me as well. One thought I did have that I'll mention here was, the quotes and those comments that we got, those might be nice to include in, in the plan document, if you will, or as you're talking about a particular issue or something, to have that, this resident commented, boom, a quote that said, "This is a concern because," that plays nicely when we can show the involvement of the outreach and that we've listened to the public and to other entities that have wanted to engage in the plan. So just a thought as we're looking at formats or laying out our recommendations, to maybe include a quote or two to help make that point. Any other thoughts on the comments that we received, either live or these that we got on the survey? I know that some individuals, for example, Wes had LMO 2 on his last slide, and that's how the state of Illinois collects water use data in northeastern Illinois and Lake Michigan water, and so some folks took advantage of our outreach as an opportunity to make a point that, hey, we don't like the way that or the detail to which you're collecting water data on Lake Michigan water use. So there were a number of comments to that end, but that was just a particular faction taking opportunity to use the state water plan outreach as a means to deliver that message that we don't like this particular aspect of a state program. Any other thoughts?
Hey, Lauren, this is Trent Ford. I think Wes's email earlier in January about the low Spanish speaking response or no Spanish speaking response to the survey, I had mentioned a couple of groups that I'd work with were asking for other materials in Spanish, summaries of the water plan or the process, things like that, that would maybe gauge a little bit better participation in the survey. Are those resources available, or are we planning on making those available when the plan is finalized?
That's a good question, Trent. I've thought about that, and I know that, we were fortunate to use MPC that had those resources for the survey, and that took a particular effort just to create one document in a bilingual fashion to, prepare an entire water plan in bilingual, or, do you go beyond? We chose Spanish, right? Should it be Polish? Should there be others? I'm not, as I thought about that, I was going to reach out to some of the folks within DNR to ask, are those kind of resources available? But in my mind, that became perhaps a point of the state water plan to say, well, hey, as we're trying to be more inclusive as state agencies of these considerations, are we as a state lacking in those kinds of resources to be able to prepare, websites or prepare public information in other languages than English? And so to me, I came back to that perhaps needs to be one of the recommendations of the water plan, is that, hey, we as a state are potentially lacking in that area to be able to provide those services in that manner. If we really want to be inclusive, we need to address the necessary resources it takes to do that. I'll look into a little more, like I said, from my end, to see what resources are currently there. But I'm not aware of, any other agency that's gone above and beyond to necessarily create information in more than one language, unless anybody else on the task force is aware.
Hello? Can you hear me? This is Anand Rao with the Illinois Pollution Control Board.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to, let you folks know that the board recently adopted regulations for CCR surface impoundments to second notice. And in that rule, the board is requiring, translation services for information that will be presented at public meetings regarding closure of the CCR surface impoundments. And they're also requiring documents to be translated if requested by the public. I don't think we specify in what language, but a lot of the comments we got were related to, I think, Spanish. But we are requiring in the rule for the first time that I know of for translation services at public meetings, and also documents to be submitted in public meetings. And if you would like to take a look at the rules, they are available on our website.
Could you send Wes or I a link to that website?
Surely, I will send the information, and we have a discussion about it in the opinion. I'll also send links to that.
Great. We'd be happy to share that with the task force as well.
All right. Thank you.
Lauren, I did want to read a comment that we got in the chat from Lauren Larkins of the Farm Bureau. Most of the time when agencies offer public comment, they will do something of a responsive summary of what was said and what was done about it. I would encourage the leads to not cherry pick here, but to think of something that adds transparency. I guess, Lauren, a question I have is what is a good form or method to do that? Are we talking about preparing charts and graphs of those summaries, similar to say something like, let me see, something like this? Or how do we try and summarize 500 different text comments that we have? You know, I do think this is important, and that's why I'm curious if others have good mechanisms to share information besides something as simple as a graph that may be able to share the overall vision whenever we receive this many comments in a report or for a report.
This is Tara, and I've worked on some other reports where we've done feedback, and I guess I just assumed when we got these results that this would be included as an appendix that would be a brief summary like you presented in those Excel spreadsheets, and it would just be a way to share with everyone what we received. But I don't know, there might be a better way to present it, but I assumed it would be part of the report.
So Tara, are you recommending that we include every single comment that we received as part of appendix to the report?
And that would be one way. I'm not sure, but I have seen that before for the people that like to know all the detail.
Any thoughts on how we share this feedback within our report, or summarize it, or incorporate it into the report?
This is Lauren Lurkins from the Farm Bureau, and I'll just follow up on that. So I'm most familiar with the Illinois EPA and how they would do, their responsiveness summaries, and they're very much point by point. And maybe that's easier when you think about your 14 emails that were sent in according to like a more traditional approach to public notice and comment. So I would encourage that, but I think if nothing else, it's a transparency to explain the process and the opportunity and who took and the questions that were asked, and some sort of summary, whatever form that has to take. I think that the survey is one thing. It's not a traditional way for maybe some of our agencies to do, but if it adds value, if not complexity for your topic leads, I think it's important to at least document it for the public to know that it happened. And most importantly, what the agency leads are doing about the information that was presented by the public.
And this is Lauren. I guess I like the idea of having an appendix, and as Laura mentioned earlier, perhaps that's highlighted in an introduction. It says, yeah, go to, this appendix to see each of the individual comments. One approach that I know has been taken, for example, by, the federal government or the Corps maybe, is to create a number of buckets, right? And then as you have 500 comments, you go through and, well, this comment fits closest into bucket number 1, or this comment fits in closest to bucket number 7. You identify some of those, again, themes of the comment. And then, so if because we might have, 17 different comments that say you need to engage the ag industry, or you need to engage, a farmer into this topic, and then to kind of gather those and then to create a response that says, yes, in order to, engage agriculture, the plan intends to X, Y, Z. Is that kind of where you're going, Lauren, or?
Well, I think I'm just looking for, I'm putting the concept out there that I think there's going to be an expectation from the public that took time to provide comments, whether they were written or filling out a survey, to figure out what the recipients of that information did with it. So I don't care. I guess I really don't have a specific need for how it shows up. I just think that, you know, we were one, Illinois Farm Bureau was one to file a comment, and, you know, I think our membership would want to know what was done with that. Usually, you know, agency by agency, there's a very defined process for how this looks. So again, I think I'm just kind of falling back on the process and the expectations, but however you want to do it, I am not envious of the role of all of those subject matter leads for having to figure out what to do with 500 different opinions, like you said, but now you have them and you have to kind of figure out what to do about it.
Thank you. Yeah. So, point taken.
This is Tara again, and I sort of renege on putting all the detail in the appendices because I forgot we'll be doing this 2 more times, and that would be problematic and too much detail. But I like the idea of a summary, just with a few of the main points, like you said, some of the main buckets, and then just maybe some tables in the back, like what is on the screen, showing what the responses were for the main questions. And I think that would show the public that we definitely listened and heard what they had to say. And then each group will be responsible for somehow addressing and suggesting how they address those specific to their criteria or to their issue.
I guess the follow-up question that you could also ask is, for the next round of public outreach, was this the best method? Should we replicate it for the phase 2 public outreach when we have them, or when we present our recommendations, or should we pivot from this method to another?
I would just say this method worked. Whether it was most ideal or not could be questioned, but given the pandemic conditions, it at least worked. All right. Well, again, encourage all the task force to take the time to go through and look at those comments if you've not already done so. You know, obviously from your particular perspective, it's pretty easy to see which ones jump out that relate to your particular topic area, and which ones clearly do not. So to go through, and then some of them might take some thought or generate additional ideas as you're developing your particular topic area. Any other thoughts or reactions to the outreach or the feedback that we got? Okay, then let's move on.
Lauren, next we just had kind of a review of our schedule, and just kind of opening up if anybody has any comments or concerns. You can kind of see it laid out. The red are the State Water Plan Task Force meetings that we have coming up in the future, similar to the one that we're having here today. The yellow highlighted are public outreach efforts that we're looking to have. Notice that the one in February, it will only be one, where the first one that was held in December and the second one in May was over a course of 3 days. That's what we had discussed early in our planning effort. And then the others are just more of deadlines for submitting information and, making and when those comment periods closed. So just kind of milestone dates as well. So I guess I kind of open it up. We have the goal to publish the report at the end of the calendar year. The only thing that would be added to this is a potential March meeting with to discuss how to incorporate social and environmental justice issues into the report, as we just discussed a few moments ago. Does anybody have anything to add or any concerns with this proposed timeline we have laid out?
Wes, for the public outreach on May 11th, 12th, 13th, if you could attach some times to that, if they might be similar or something like that, so we all can get this penned into our calendars.
Yeah, Laura, I didn't list it here, but I anticipate it will be the same times that we had for the first aid. So the 11th would be at 10 a.m. The 12th would be was it 2 p.m., I believe, and the 13th would be a 5 p.m. Lauren, is that what you were envisioning as well as we talked about this public outreach?
Yes, that seemed to play well in the first round.
Sounds good. Thank
So
you.
the times again would be 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 5 p.m. Lauren, do you think the 5 p.m. worked out okay? Was that too early for an evening meeting? Not that we all want to be working late, but I'm just thinking that may be a transition time when some individuals are commuting home, things like that. Just throwing it out there for discussion.
Yeah, it might have been maybe a 6 p.m. start is a better 6 to 8.
Well, it sounds like we'll definitely hold the 10 a.m. for the 11th, the 2 o'clock for the 12th, and maybe we'll look at a 6 p.m. for the 13th. Unless there's any objections, I'll plan to move that way. Are there any other comments on the listed schedule? Yeah, and just a clarification, we got a comment from Kelly at the USGS about the agenda said June 14th. Yeah, we had revised some things since then. So this will be, what you're seeing on the screen is the most accurate up to date. And we'll be updating the website accordingly. So in discussions with Lauren yesterday, we did some tweaking due to some of his scheduling conflicts that had come up since even the agenda was put together, which was based on prior meetings. So what you see on the screen is the most current proposed schedule timeline. So my apologies for the inconsistency there. Okay, hearing nothing else, so I'll go ahead and assume that everybody is good with this. So no problems getting those deadlines met for submitting report sections that we have laid out. Again, March 8th is the finalizing the issues. August 31st would be finalizing the recommendations. And then, you know, we're looking at getting final reports and finalizing the report at the end of the calendar year. So with that, I think that kind of concludes all of our agenda issues. We are looking at our next meeting being April 21st. Likely a web meeting again. I don't anticipate we'll stray from this platform anytime too soon. The focus will be looking at the public outreach covering the recommendations. And I guess this does not include a potential March meeting for the topics or presentation on the social environmental justice issues. But is there any other items that anyone can think of that we should include in the April agenda?
Hey, Wes, this is
Do we
Kel.
wait until the April meeting to select the format, or do we need to do that ahead of time? I think we could probably wait till the April meeting. I know Laura and Wes and I and others are going to create some draft layouts there. We could share those. I don't think the layout necessarily hinders the continued development of the issues and recommendations. So perhaps we finalize that kind of a layout or presentation at the April 21st meeting.
Yeah, I'll add that to the agenda. Is there anything else?
We're going to pre-record presentations again and things of that nature.
I think that's going to be the best method. I assume you're referring to the public outreach effort, and that we'll likely ask each lead to prepare a slide or two, maybe a little more focused on the individual topics more than last time. So we may have a couple slides to cover each, but I think that's what we're really going to work out the details on in the April meeting.
I did think that worked well, and kind of putting that out there to everybody, and then using our time that we're live with each other to really get into the question, answer, and discussions, and not use the time to go through presentations to that level. So I thought it worked well on the first outreach, and would suggest that we do similar for this next round.
Hey, Wes, this is Kelly Warner. It's a little, I have a comment that's a little aside from the water plan, but most of you may know that the USGS has had a new emphasis for the Illinois River Basin for a next generation observing system study that's part of our integrated water assessment. And we're going to be getting about $1 million starting this year to work on it. And the first step is we're doing stakeholder outreach to try to align what we're going to do with other work going on in the basin, and to make sure that we're addressing some of the other stakeholder issues. And this group was identified as one of the groups that the USGS NGWASP group would like to reach out to see how collaboration and goals to be the same. And so I'm mentioning that because they'll probably be contacting Lauren or contacting this group to see if there's a time between the end of February and the middle of March, that they could meet and discuss that with this group.
Yeah, Kelly, I think we can accommodate maybe a standalone meeting. You know, I'm not sure if everybody will be able to attend. I mean, we don't always have 100% attendance there, but I think this is a good platform to find out what all the different agencies are working on within a specific basin. So if you want to coordinate that with me, I can make sure that we get that out to the group, and hopefully they can find that in their calendar to work that out. If you want me to send something out to our group as far as availability, I can definitely coordinate that.
Great. We'll follow, Jim Dunker and I will follow up with you on that.
Sounds good. Are there any other comments either in regards to the next agenda or anything in general? We'll kind of open it up for any general discussions, comments, or questions as well. I do know we have a number of stakeholders on the meeting as well, so feel free to share your opinion or thoughts, how things are going, you know, ways that we can improve what we're doing here. We won't know unless we receive the feedback. So any comments, thoughts about anything in general as we proceed in updating the state water plan? Well, not hearing anything, Lauren, that is all I have, unless you have anything you'd like to add.
No, just thank everybody for their time today. I will mention that, you know, Wes and I, and yesterday, I guess it was yesterday, Wes and I and Dave, you know, have been doing outreach to specific groups. I think yesterday's presentation was to the Illinois Climate Change Work Group, and we've given similar kind of what is the water plan, what is its purpose kind of presentations to various regional groups. So if you're aware of, you know, particular groups out there that would like that kind of information, that we would obviously want to direct them to our website. That a lot of information's there, but we have been doing those kinds of brief presentations and encouraging those groups to contact all the topic leads as they can provide insight and value to the development of the report. So I wanted to make you aware of that, and you know, be looking in case you're contacted that, hey, we heard a presentation by, you know, Wes on such and such a date, and we'd like to offer our insights to you as a lead. So know that. But otherwise, thank you all for your time as we continue to press forward and get a water plan together. So if there's no other comments with that, I would suggest we close for today.
Thank you very much, Wes, Lauren.
All right. Well, hearing none, thank you, everybody. Again, Wes and I, you know, are always available by email as well if you've got other follow-up thoughts or comments. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
I think so.
Thank you.